is GySgt McGrortyhunter, and on October 1st, 2017, my wife and I were attending the Route 91 Country Music Festival in Las Vegas, Nevada, situated on the Las Vegas Strip. And on the third and final night of the concert, the headlining act was Jason Aldean, and about midway through his set, a series of cracks whipped through the naturally noisy atmosphere of the Las Vegas Boulevard. And it brought the concert to a stop, but only for about a second. But inside that time frame, you could kind of hear the mumblings in the crowd. You could hear people say, was that gunshots? Was that the speakers cracking? Was that fireworks? But only a few seconds later, the concert picked back up, and it kind of put everybody at ease. But about 5 seconds after that, another series of gunshots rang out, and this one was a lot more distinct, and you could tell it was automatic weapons fire. And I immediately knew that we were in a really dangerous spot at that point in time. So I grabbed my wife and I oriented us towards an exit that was actually opposite of where we were inside the concert venue. And the reason I did that is because I knew that there's different exit points, and I knew that that one specifically would take us away from the casinos, away from the hotels, what I figured would be the epicenter of the attack. And so I started to push us through the crowd, but it was so thick that we only made it about 10 or 15 feet before the next series of gunshots cut into the crowd. And when that next series cut into the crowd, everybody collapsed in a domino effect. And under the crushing weight of everybody's bodies, we were brought down as well. To the point where I could barely free enough of my body to grab my wife and try and bring her down under my chest to shield her from the bullets. And in that time frame, I entered into what would be like a second OODA loop. I was already oriented within the concert. I knew where we were inside the venue, and I knew where I wanted to go, but we were stuck. And so I started to go back into the observation cycle, and I pushed myself up off the bodies that were below me and above me. And I tried to orient and see like where the shooter was at, to try and figure out if this is gonna be a situation where they were so close that we'd have to charge them, or if it was a situation where they were further away and our best avenue would be to try and escape. And I couldn't find anybody, so I figured our best color would be to try and still get out of there. But we were trapped in there for about 60 to 90 seconds, and in that time frame, over 500 rounds were fired in the crowd around us. And when you're put in a situation like that, time kind of elongates. Seconds feel like hours. And I can distinctly remember the conversation I had with myself in my head while I was laying there covering my wife, and the shots were ringing out around us. I remember thinking, like, I can't believe that this is a terrorist attack, and I can't believe that we're in the middle of a terrorist attack. And then I remember thinking that I can't believe that I'm about to die inside of a terrorist attack. And I remember thinking that, how's this gonna feel? How's it gonna feel to get shot? And I wondered if I was gonna get shot in the head and if it was gonna be instant, or if I was gonna be shot somewhere else and I was gonna, just feel the pain. And then I remember thinking, I really hope that the bullet doesn't pass all the way through my body, because if it does, then it's gonna hit my wife. And when those thoughts are going through your head, you can't truly understand how terrifying it is, because as Marines, we're always taught that, when the enemy presents itself, you meet that enemy with violence of action and you respond. But in a situation like that, where you can't respond to the enemy, where you're getting shot at from somewhere where you don't know, you don't have a weapon, you're just put into terror with everybody else. And it's very easy to be paralyzed by that fear, by the feeling that you're about to die possibly. But you also have to remember that you have to still make decisions. You still have to act, because fear and being paralyzed and not doing anything is an action in and of itself. And that's probably not the action that you need to be taking in that situation. And so I figured as soon as we could escape, that we would. In hindsight, I know what I thought I knew at that moment in time, which was that my wife and I were inside of the epicenter of the attack. When the FBI report came out a few months later, we saw that we were in the area where more people were shot and killed than any other place inside that concert that night.
Hey, you guys, get down! Go that way! Get out of here, there's gunshots coming from over there!
So when we got the opportunity to finally make our escape and enough people had freed up to where we could move our bodies, there were still a lot of people frozen on the ground around us. And so we climbed over the initial bodies that were in front of us. We got to a point where we could stand up and we started to run. And we were encouraging these people that were still frozen on the ground to get up and run themselves. In fact, there were people that were in denial. They were standing in the open while people were, being shot around them. And they were just saying, what's wrong with you guys? This is part of the show. You need to calm down. And alcohol probably played a pretty large factor inside of their inability to comprehend what was happening around them at the moment. We encouraged all of them to run, but we didn't slow down our escape in order to do that. We just continued to push. And when we got to the approach to the exit, I remember thinking, this is going to be secondary attacks. They're going to have a pipe bomb located at the exit, or they're going to have shooters ready to shoot people as we come out of these defined choke points. Luckily, that did not occur. As soon as we did make our exit, the first thing that I saw was a police officer with his gun drawn across his hood. And people were flocking to the police officer. They were hiding behind his car. And I remember looking back at my wife and telling her, we need to get away from the police because they're going to be drawing fire.
Control, just advising there are people down on stage left.
We have multiple casualties. CSW is a medical team. Multiple casualties.
Control, be advised, shots are coming forward, coming from stage.
Cover. No, come here. Hey, get behind cover.
So we started to run down the street further to try and get away from the concert venue and away from the casinos. And I pulled out my phone and I called my grandfather and I said, Grandpa, there's been a terrorist attack. I need you to come down to the strip. I'm going to drop my location on my iPhone. And I hung up. It was a 10-second phone call. In that 10 seconds, my wife saw a woman that was in distress on the street. She reached out and she grabbed her and she said, are you alone? The woman screamed back that she was. My wife said, come with us. My husband's a Marine. He'll get us out of here. The woman screamed back through her phone to her husband. She said, honey, I found a Marine. I'm going with him. I love you. Goodbye. We latched arms and we started to run down the street. And I remember thinking we need to get off the street because people don't shoot what they can't see. And so I found this big pile of scrap metal, scrap wood, things like that. And I put the women behind it and I placed myself in a position where I could see back out onto the street. As that's happening, more and more people are making their escape from the venue and they're trying to seek cover. And so there's people hiding under cars or hiding under, behind bushes next to us, things like that. And all the while, these people are all on their phones and they're screaming and crying to their families, but they're also pulling in reports. And so I'm hearing things like there's a shooter in Mandalay Bay, there's a shooter in Tropicana, there's a shooter in New York, New York. These are all casinos that are surrounding our area.
Terrorist related, 3 shooters so far.
We're getting reports of shots fired at New York, shots fired at Tropicana. We don't know if they're diversion tactics or not.
As this is happening, I'm telling people, keep your voices down, turn down the screen brightness on your phone because I don't want them to give away our position. And 2 more people roll up to our position. One is an injured woman that's being drugged by her friend, and she's screaming that she has a broken leg. And so we take both of them and we put them behind this pile of scrap metal and scrap wood with us. And my wife immediately starts to calm them down with the same sentiment. She says, it's going to be okay. My husband's a Marine. Just listen to him and he'll get us out of here. And all the while, I'm coordinating with my grandfather to figure out, where we needed to move to. And I figured that the police are going to be setting up some kind of cordon or some kind of barricade to engage the gunmen, and we're going to have to get outside that perimeter if we want to make our escape. And so I finally turned to the women. I say, get ready, we need to move.
There's numerous reports coming in. We have 33 calls holding. It's an active shooter.
And this immediately brings the shock and the fear back into their faces. And I remember the woman without the injured leg grabs me and she says, are you really a Marine? Are you really? And I flashed the screen on my iPhone to her and it has a picture of me in my dress blues with my wife at my friend's wedding. And she immediately sees that and she turns back to her friend with the injured leg and she says, oh my God, he really is a Marine. It's going to be okay. And we grabbed the woman with the injured leg and I slung her arm over my shoulder and we started to run down the street. And about 200 feet down the street ahead of us, there was a fire truck and then there was an ambulance and they were setting up like a hasty triage center and they were treating people on the ground. And the woman with the injured leg is screaming at me in pain, telling me to get her to the ambulance. So I run her over to the ambulance and the paramedic is coming out of the ambulance as we approach it. And she says, what's her injury? And I say she's got a broken leg. And she says, we're only taking gunshot wounds, place her down on the curb.
We have room in here. We have room for one in the next.
He's not shooting at his I need help over there.
Okay. We hanging in there? Okay, I gotta keep that pressure, sweetheart.
The woman is screaming in pain, telling me to put her down, but I know at that point in time that we're still in the line of fire. And so I refuse to put her down and I instead sling her arm back over my shoulder and I start to run down the street further. And when we got to Tropicana Avenue, which is one of the main thoroughfares there in Las Vegas, I placed the women behind a big boulder for some cover. And I ran out onto Tropicana Avenue and I call my grandpa and I say, Grandpa, you're coming in from the east. I need you to look on the right-hand side of the street. You're gonna see this specific billboard. When you see that, I need you to flash your high beams 3 times and I'm gonna flash you with my iPhone, the light on my iPhone. And so my grandfather does that. I'm able to locate him. We pile all the women into the back of the car, jump in there, and we make our final escape from the venue that night. And it wasn't until we got back to my grandfather's house that we started to triage the woman and help her out with her injuries, because I knew at the time that she's not going to die from a broken leg, but we had bigger things to worry about. So I think the biggest takeaway that I had from that night was ultimately that our reputation does precede us, and that it sounds like a cool recruiting slogan or a bumper sticker, but there's also a real gravity and a real weight to that when you think about it, because when we get into tight situations like that, the American people, when they find out that you're a Marine, they're gonna put a lot of trust and confidence in your ability to make the decisions that are gonna get them out of there that night. Ultimately, none of the women that night ever asked, what my MOS was, what my background, had I ever been on a deployment. None of those things mattered to them. The only thing that did matter to them was that they had found a United States Marine, and that meant something to them. It meant that they'd be willing to put their lives into the hands of a complete stranger and trust that the decisions that I was gonna make was gonna get them out of there that night. And ultimately, that's the responsibility that we hold as Marines, and we have to prepare the Marines that we lead to be able to live up to that moment when it does come.